Hi, Chris Holmes here, that coaching guy from Maryland, and I'm going to talk with you for a little while about developing lay leadership, a critical task for those of us who are clergy in the church. And I started to think about the fact that Jesus spent just about all of his time with laypersons. He spent very little time with the religious and the clergy of his day, and when he did, it was very often a run-in. And Christ equipped people who are in our congregations to be servants in ministry. In fact, Paul writes about that in the 4th chapter of Ephesians, starting with verse 11. He talks about, so Christ himself gave the apostles, prophets, evangelists, teachers, pastors, all these varying gifts for this purpose, to equip his people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up. So Christ equipped people with all these gifts for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up. Every one of us, every last one of us, has been majorly affected in our lives by a layperson along the way. I'm wondering who that, give some thought to that, if you would. Who the layperson who's made a tremendous impact in your life has been. For me, it was a guy named Bill McWorkman. He was my high school Sunday school teacher, and he's not the typical person you would deploy to be or ask to be a high school Sunday school teacher, because he wasn't young, he wasn't cool. He was an older guy. He was probably close to 60, working with high school students. And I don't really remember much that Bill Workman ever taught us. What I remember is that he cared about us. I remembered that he asked us questions about our lives. He cared deeply, not only the years we were in the Sunday school class, but also the years that followed when we went off to college. He stayed in touch with us, and he just kept pouring himself into our lives, and he modeled for us what an authentic walk with Christ looked like, what an authentic life of faith looked like. Most of us have been profoundly affected by somebody like that along the way, a layperson. One of the places that I worship now is with the Quakers, the Friends meeting. And the interesting thing about the Quakers is they don't have a pastor. They don't have a pastor. They just have laypersons. And yet they visit people in the hospital. Someone speaks on Sunday morning. Somebody runs the meetings. And all of that gets done without a paid, there's not a paid secretary. There's nobody, just a community of faith, of followers of Christ, living out their faith in service through the community. So it's a very interesting model. What I've observed over time happening to us in most of our mainline churches is this increasing professionalization of the clergy. And so you and I become this, professional Christian with the expectation that we are the ones that do much of the ministry, rather than equipping others to do the ministry of the church. Think of how much time do you spend calling and equipping other people, laypersons, to be in ministry, versus how much time you are actually doing ministry. I think we've forgotten somewhere along the way that the true backbone of ministry in the church really belongs to the laity. And in too many cases, the ministry of the laity is underwhelmingly utilized. And that's for a lot of reasons, I'm sure. One of the tendencies we have is we've trained our lay people not to really do significant ministry, but we stick them on a committee and we call that ministry. Or, gosh, I know a lot of you are serving churches where the laity are just tired. They're just tired. They've been plugging at this and, doing the work of the church for a long, long time. And they're old and they're tired and and they'd love to hand it off to somebody else. They say that, but there's an edge to that even. because they've gotten so used to it that sometimes the handoff doesn't really go very well. So the United Methodist Church has been studying congregations that tend to be thriving and vital, and have found out some interesting things about those congregations when it comes to their lay leadership. Those congregations tend to have a knack for uncovering and widely utilizing the gifts of their laity. They do it by developing an intentional system of figuring out what people's spiritual gifts are, and then matching those gifts in service. And they ask people to serve in specific ways in ministry rather than the kind of general "y'all come," we need a third grade teacher from the pulpit. That doesn't work anymore. It's specifically matching a member's gift with their service and asking them to do that works. We've also realized from those recent studies that highly vital congregations tend to rotate their key leadership on a regular basis, and they choose leaders who are spiritually mature. So that rotation of leadership keeps fresh blood moving, and it also levels out the sense of responsibility that people have for the church and the kind of ownership for the workings of the church. And the spiritual maturity really helps, especially in times of conflict in a church where they tend to have a clear understanding of the purpose of the church and a more prayerful perspective during times of conflict. Another thing that vital congregations are good at doing is training their laity, whether it's in the local church setting, in that context, or taking advantage of conference and district training opportunities. The final thing I want to say before we end this video has to do with the coach approach to ministry, which it's where my heart is in coaching and in sharing the gifts of coaching with pastoral leaders and congregations. I just want you to think about that for a little bit, what it would look like for you to lead your congregation from a coach approach. And instead of doing so much ministry, to rely on the laity and come alongside them in a way that helps them be successful in what they're doing, and that champions the ministry that belongs to the laity.